In this tutorial, we're going to talk at a very high level about how race coordinator is broken down. This will enable you to understand better the things you need to change when you want to make changes, and what to customize and how to do it. Race coordinator is broken down into 3 required components and 2 optional parts. If you're already familiar with how race coordinator works, this is only going to touch the surface and not give you the details you're probably going to be looking for. We won't even go into any of the wizards, manager screens, whatnot in this tutorial. This is purely a high-level description of what each part of race coordinator has to offer. With that said, the first required component to running a race coordinator race is the track configuration. The track configuration represents your physical racing surface and the connection of that surface to your computer. Configuration options include things like how many lanes the track has, the lane lengths, lane coloring, section count if you use that on your track, as well as, of course, the interface to the PC. The interface to the PC currently supports parallel port configurations, TrackMate through the serial port, web camera interface, and an experimental game port. Before you can race, you need at least one track set up. Race coordinator does support more than one track being set up at the same time, although the most common case will be for you to have one and only one. The reason to have multiple would be that you have 2-3 tracks in your home or in your club, and you want them all hooked up to the same computer, and you want to rotate between those. Heck, you could even run, both tracks at the same time if you got window screen size big enough. But the most common case will be to have one and only one track set up at a time. The second required component of RC to run a race is the driver. The driver configuration, big shock, represents the person controlling the car on the track. This configuration is fairly simple, and it includes a name, a nickname for the driver, an image of the driver, and audio callouts for the driver when they achieve personal bests, race bests, or overall records. The name and the nickname of the driver must be unique across all other driver names in the system. The image of the driver can be one of the ones provided on a race coordinator install, or it can be a user-provided image, so you can take a picture of yourself, you can bring in a funny picture, whatever you want to do. The audio callouts also can all be customized. Race coordinator supplies default values or default callouts, as well as allows you to place your own WAV files in as the callouts instead. Third required component of race coordinator is the race configuration itself. Of course, you have to specify how you want to race. And that's exactly what this does. The configuration represents exactly every detail of how a particular race for the night will run. The configuration includes things like which track the race is going to be run on, which in turn determines how many lanes are on the track. The race configuration holds how you want to rotate, how the heats rotate through those lanes. It includes how you score each individual heat. It includes how long each individual heat lasts, whether the heats end based on lap count or based on time. The race configuration includes other things like overall how to score for the overall standings, and then it even includes what user interface screen to use for the actual race day screen, which is completely customizable. Race coordinator again supplies ample default screens, but the user can create their own and drop that in as the race day screen to use. Many users again will probably only create one race configuration and run that same one over and over again. That's certainly how I race. However, more complicated club nights or users who just like to mix things up, whether it be however they want to run, they may have set one or more, multiple race formats. It's really unlimited how many you have. On a given night, you just choose which race you want to use. Once it's set up, and you go. That's the beauty of it. You can set them all up way ahead of time. Once they're set up and you have them the way you like them, you just click on it and say race. Some of the common race formats that are supported in Race Coordinator are, of course, the practice races, which are non-standing base races that just allow you to get the timing and feeling of your car and the track and your controller and all that stuff, as well as all sorts of round-robin style heat rotations, step-up races, F1 style scoring races, races that drop the lowest, the driver's worst heat scores if you want to, races that score by fastest lap time rather than lap count, races that score by total lap time rather than lap count or fastest lap. There's group and team races supported. The list goes on and on. I mean, and on top of all of the different features that our race coordinator supports, pretty much all of them are interchangeable. So you can do a round-robin step-up race if you'd like. You can do a round-robin F1 style scoring race if you'd like. I mean, it really makes for a very large amount of different race formats that you can choose from and you can race. The other important thing to note about races is that they have a concept of a driver seating. This is the ranking that they go into the race, that they start out the race in, as well as and then the overall standings, which is the seating they come out of the race in. And this is important, one, to identify how the heat rotations are going to work, but also how to identify the winner of the race, and in more advanced setups, the seeding for the next race in an event, which we'll get to, which we'll talk about later. But the initial seeding is determined by just the ordering that they're placed in the race day setup screen that you can see here. So you can see in this screen, I've added 20 drivers. Driver 1 is seed 1, driver 20 is seed 20. So based on how the heat rotations work, driver 1 will sit in the number 1 seed's heat listings. It's very important, especially for things like step-up races in which the number 1 seed would only have to run in one race and the number 20 seed would have to run in, who knows how many, several, to step up into the finals. The seeding, the end seeding, is determined by the race configuration, of course. So the overall standings, however they're calculated based on configuration, will determine the final race seeding. The number 1 seed being the winner, number 2 being second place, all the way down into the final last spot. These are important things to understand later, again, as much so that you can identify who the winner is, although the leaderboard will be very clear in terms of telling you, here's the winner, but as much as for the race events, understanding how they'll work later. That's it for all the required fields. Once you set up a single race, at least one driver, odds are you'll set up more than one driver just so that you can have a competition rather than race by yourself. And then the track, you can then start racing. But there are 2 other components that you can configure as well if you'd like to make things more interesting and more advanced. The first is the car. The car configuration represents, obviously, the slot car on the track. It's optional to set up again, but it will be included with the statistics for the race, which is nice. You can see who got the best lap time and what car they used. You can configure the name of the car, optional information about the car, like is it the Home Depot car or whatever. You can include types like the SG Plus. You can give it a type, SG Plus, Mega G, T-Jet, etc., and you can give it car image. Completely optional setup, but if you want to, you can add them into the race day setup screen before you start your race. The final optional component is the race event. This is a configuration that is generally used for more advanced racing. It allows for a series of races to be run in sequence, with the results of the current race affecting the seeding and even which drivers are allowed to advance to the next race. And this is where, again, the race seeding becomes very important. So all races until the last race are considered qualifying races, so you may win every single race up until the last race in the event, but lose the last race in the event, and you will not be the winner of the event. Maybe your club gives awards for winning the qualifiers, maybe not, but you don't win the event. The configuration includes, which races are in the event and how many drivers are allowed to participate in that event. Meaning, you can whittle the field down. Like in this case, I've got 20 drivers. If the second race in the event only allows 4 drivers, the top 4 drivers will be allowed to race in this event, and that is all. So that's it. That's a high-level overview of all the components that RC has. I hope you found this at least somewhat helpful. See the future tutorials for more information and details on each one of these components. Good racing.